because a few months have passed since the budget cleared, and have you thought about anything that you would change in hindsight that you would reconsider?
You know, Oscar, I ask myself that question. I've asked myself that question at least 50 times. And I shared with my partner, and I asked her, I says, you know, did I make a mistake? And she knows what I based my decisions on. There's no hidden agendas. It's not about anything but doing what I thought was right. And I can tell you is that when it comes to the budget, no, I would not do anything different because I know what the impact would have been in this community. And let me just give you a small sample of what we're talking about. Not this last budget, but the budget before that.
Right.
Again, it was a flat budget, so we had to make some cuts. One of the cuts that was recommended by the fire department is that one of their least busiest stations, which is the one on Key Biscayne, Station 15, that they recommended that we could not close it, but just keep it open 50% of the time. And it would save us about $650,000. And we went along with it. It passed. And then what occurred several weeks later or months later, we had a horrible tragedy in the Rickenbacker where a bicyclist was hit by a DUI and died. And the response time of the fire rescue units was not good. There was a delay.
Right.
Immediately, people thought, elected officials and general public thought that it was because that station was closed when the accident happened.
Right.
Actually, it wasn't a budgetary issue. It was an error that was committed by the communications department in dispatching. If that station was closed, they should have dispatched Key Biscayne, who has their own fire department,
Right.
2 minutes away from our station,
Right.
and they would have been there, or the city of Miami. There was a delay, it was an error, but the point I'm trying to make is we're talking about one fire station,
Right.
not closed completely, 50% of the time, and all it took was one incident.
Right.
And within a matter of, I'm guesstimating here, but within a matter of a month, that station was open 24/7. So, you know, I deal with those issues every single day. When we proposed that pools would be closed during off months,
Right.
It's hot all the time here in Miami, except for today, but when we proposed that we would close pools down every single month, with the exception of the summertime,
Right.
it was an uproar. You can't close the pools down in parks. So whatever decision we make, libraries,
Right.
let's close one extra day in the libraries. Well, people that go to libraries on that particular day,
Right.
up in arms. The point I'm trying to make is the service reductions. Now, we've already closed over $1 billion budget gap over a course of 4 years.
Right.
You're down to, you know, really impacting direct services to citizens. And I'm telling you that people wouldn't accept that.
Right.
Philosophically, it might sound good,
Right.
especially if your tax bill went up $300. You know, you might say, well, you know, in these times, I shouldn't pay $300
Right.
more. So I can't convince you of that. But from a global perspective and from the phone calls that we get,
Right.
I can tell you that, you know, when somebody calls the police department,
Right.
they you know, and the police department takes 10 minutes to get there. Those are the longest 10 minutes of your life.
Right.
So if we go from 10 minutes to 14 minutes,
Right.
people are not going to be happy or won't tolerate that.
Right.
And therefore, I made a decision. And look, Oscar, like I said, this was a budget that I recommended. I believed in it.
Right.
I don't blame anybody. I'm not a victim of anything.
Right.
There's not a conspiracy against me.
Right.
It's a recommendation of a budget that I
Right.
made. I think people forget sometimes that for all the elected officials that say that it's a horrible budget, nobody had any other options.
Right.
Actually, the budget that I submitted was changed over the course of the meetings we had in September,
Right.
but nothing was deleted. Things were added.
Right.
So, you know, when I hear that people are upset with a rollback budget, I'm going, well, but, and Commissioner Say has put it very well during, I think it was the last budget hearing. I says, because she was one of the yes votes, 8 to
Right.
5, it passed, and she goes, you know, I'm open to any suggestions, but I don't hear anyone here
Right.
giving any options.
Right.
I mean, what are you going to do to close the gap in the fire department? Now, a lot of people are under the opinion and impression is that you make up that hole by cutting salaries.
Right.
Well, but they tend to forget that we bargained with our unions
Right.
for a 3-year contract, and during that second year of the contract, salary concessions and benefit concessions were made that have never been made in the history of Miami-Dade County.
And actually, the salaries are a huge issue. That's a
It is a huge
you know,
issue.
it's a touch point for a lot of people.
You're absolutely right.
Right.
But over the, and this is fact, over the life of the 3-year contract, Miami-Dade County is going to realize a $224 million savings. So, I mean, you could argue that, okay, they took, the employees took a 5% reduction and everything was frozen for a year. You could argue, I mean, and I guess you could argue it, that if we're facing another budget shortfall next year,
Right.
you should cut salaries again and do all sorts of things. And,
Right.
you know, but, you know, the fact of the matter is that you have about 90% of our employees are represented by a union, and they're not just going to say, okay, yes, we're going to take that and,
Right.
and we're happy with it. With the exception of, I believe, one union, every single one of them went to impasse.
Right.
So there was an agreement on anything, and we had been bargaining in good faith, which is required by law,
Right.
for about 1.5 years. And out of the 10 unions, 9 of them went to impasse in front of our county commission. And what we had bargained for, what we had gone back and forth, was ultimately approved.
Right.
But again, you know, if somebody had real heartburn with that, you know,
Right.
the police contract is discussed a lot. Do people realize that that contract passed 11-2 with no discussion?
Right.
But it's Mayor Alvarez, the former cop, that gave the cops a sweetheart deal.
Right.
I mean, it could have failed. And like I told one of the commissioners, look, you can send us back to try to resolve this, to try to come up with a better deal. I can tell you that we've been going back and forth for 1.5 years, and it gets to a point where here we are at impasse. You know, you could impose it. If you send us back, we're going to come back next month and say we're still at an impasse.
Right.
So at some point in time, you have to stop, and a decision has to be made.
Well, I can tell you that we asked for people to send us questions through Twitter and Facebook, and 2 people in particular focused on the issue of raises. Rebecca Trujillo and also someone who goes by Concerned Citizen of Liberty City. And they both focused on the raises. In fact, Trujillo said you should have pressed the unions to forego their salary increases for a year and then freeze all salaries. And then Concerned Citizen said not requiring a salary sacrifice from county employees overall is like thumbing your nose at the electorate. So what's your response to that? Because I'm sure you hear that a lot.
Oscar, I don't know if you remember this, but I'm being recalled over this rollback budget.
Right.
But the budget before that, I had demonstrations by every labor union, the AFL-CIO and every labor union, demonstrating because the mayor had imposed a 5% reduction in everybody's salary forever, had imposed a freezing of every salary adjustment, every salary increase for a year, and that's how we balanced the budget 2 years ago. So 1 year, I have all 10 labor unions demonstrating against me for imposing all these salary cuts and cuts in benefits, and the next year, I'm being recalled because people are actually getting salary increases. So the point I'm trying to make is, during difficult times, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And if you want to be popular, don't be mayor during difficult times.
Well, I can tell you, I mean, from what you're talking about, and I know it's true and everyone here knows it's true, is that property taxes are going to continue probably to sink. So next year, it's going to be as dire, if not more dire. So what are the choices then? More job cuts, salary? I mean,
that's what's going to happen.
Right.
And I think that that my election, whenever it takes place, will be very. I think it's going to be it's going to be very reflective as to what type of services citizens want. Because, like you said, next year, while I don't believe that we'll have the 13% reduction that we had this year, or the 10 that we had the year before, which it was double digit. While I don't think it will be there, if we had 6% or 7%, you're at a point where every cut you make, there's going to be it's going to affect direct services. People say, cut the fat. Well, where is the fat?
Right.
Well, the fat is in IT, right? Well, we've cut that. The fat is in procurement. We've cut procurement. The fat is in personnel. Well, we've cut personnel. What people don't realize is that to have that solid waste worker out there, or to have that firefighter out there, or to have that police officer out there, or to have that parks employee out there, there has to be a group of people behind them that support them. An IT person, an employee relations person, and all those procurement. People say, well, it takes forever to get something in the county. Well, yeah, and then it's going to take longer. So, I mean, we've cut. I believe that we have about 27,500 employees. You'd have to go back to the mid-90s to be where we're at now. I think the highest we were was 32,000. So there has been a reduction. We've frozen hiring. Basically, the only department that has not frozen has not frozen hiring is the corrections department. And the reason for that is because that saves us money in the long run. Corrections, most of the employees have fixed posts that have to be covered by law. If you don't cover it with somebody regular duty, you have to cover it on off duty, which means that you're going to spend more money. So the only department that basically hasn't stopped hiring is corrections. But everybody else, I mean, the police department just put in a class of about 30 laterals, which means they're already certified, but they hadn't had a class in about 18 months. Fire department hasn't had a class in several years. And for somebody to be hired from the outside of the county, the director has to convince their boss that that position is crucial. Whether it's somebody that has expertise in the zoo, or somebody that works in the medical examiner's office, or somebody in water and sewer that a very specific engineer. So, you know, we have reduced the size of labor. I'm sure that there will be further reductions. But at some point in time, you know, you just don't get services for free.